Now let us say a few words about why we used replace and not update, and what would change if we used update. To see this, let us go to the editor and replace this to update, and this as well. Now come back to the browser and refresh, and when I click this, you see that now we have div with the ID of message 29, and form also has the same ID. Before we proceed, let us consider a few slides. The key differences between update and replace is that update changes only the inner HTML contents only, and replace changes outer HTML. It replaces entire element. So if we use update, the wrapper stays and only the content changes. As you see, when we use update, before and after, the wrappers are the same and the content is different. And when we use replace, the entire element is changed. In this case, we could have a partial displayed, but when we click the edit link, it will change the entire element. Wrapper also changes. So when we should use update, usually we should use update when we need to keep the same element. The element has CSS classes, other attributes, or listeners that we want to preserve, or we update the same element repeatedly and do not want to spend time updating it every time. And we need to use replace when we need to change the element's attributes, classes, or tag type, when we need to update the wrapper and its contents, and we need to swap the entire component. In our case, details of the message could have been displayed using one style or CSS classes, and when we click the edit link, we may want to display it using totally different CSS classes, meaning in those cases it is likely that we want to replace also the wrapper. So that's why we used replace. But let's see what would change if we used update as we did now. As we said, in this case, we now have two elements with the same ID. So this means if we go back to the editor, open the form, and remove this ID, it should still work. Let's refresh. Let's change it. As you see, it still worked, because in this case we have a div with the ID of message 29, and when we got this response, Turbo could see what should be replaced. And as we just said, when we use update, the wrapper stays. We can see it in here. When we go back to elements, you see that when we click the edit link, the wrapper was not changed. And let us go back to the editor, change it back to what it was. Let us use replace again, refresh, and this time when we click the edit link, we again get the wrapper totally replaced with a new one, as we mentioned here. We already used one of the most powerful features of TurboStreams, multiple actions in one response. This is what makes TurboStreams relatively more useful and more powerful compared to TurboFrames. Let us add messages counter to see more examples of multiple actions being implemented in one TurboStream response. For this, let me go back to the editor. Let us add a new file called counter. And let us use it inside of two TurboStream files that will affect total messages count. In here, in the messages destroy TurboStream file, and in the create. And let us also remove this since we moved it to the message partial and add it in here. Okay, and now let us go to messages index file and use that partial in here. And let us wrap all these in brackets. Okay, now if we add a test message, we should get it updated. You see that we got a new element here, and if we delete it, we should get this updated. As you see, it works. Now this counter size is a little bit too big. Let's make it a little smaller. For this, let me add maybe and okay. At this stage, let us discuss one important point one more time. As you remember, to implement this counter, we used update. We used TurboStream update. Was it right thing to do this, or should we have used TurboStream replace? To consider this, let us go back to the browser and let us explore this. As you see, currently we have only one span with this ID. And because we use update, let us add a test message here. Paste it, and let us see what has changed here. As you see, now we got two spans with the same ID. We have an ID conflict. Why this happens? As you remember, we said that update changes only the inner HTML, while replace changes the out HTML or the entire element. What this means? In here, if we come back to the counter, this whole thing is this entire element, while inner HTML is what is inside of this wrapper. That means that when we use update, only this part or whatever is wrapped inside of the wrapper will be updated or replaced. When we use replace, this entire thing would be replaced. Because we use update, we added in this area one more time the same HTML content. That's why in this case we have duplicate IDs. One more time, let us visit this slide and go to the next one. With update, we keep the wrapper and only this part or what's inside of the wrapper changes. With replace, the entire element gets replaced. So in this case, if we change this to replace, and let's also find create related file, and also let's use replace here. And if we come back to the browser, refresh, and now if we delete this, as you see, we do not get duplicate one. And if we add this message again, as you see, we again don't get duplicate one. So in this kind of cases, we had better used replace instead of update. But let us also consider what would be a good case to use update. For this, let me undo this. Let's skip update. Let's also go to destroy and also undo here. Let's change it back to update. Let's find the counter and let's remove this outside of this. Partial. Let's keep it just like this. And let's go back to messages index and wrap this inside in here. Inside of this. And if we go back to the browser now, refresh, and if we delete this message, you see that in this case we do not get a duplicate span with the same ID. And if we add a new message again, let's add back the test message. Again, we do not get a duplicate span with the same ID. And why this works? Why this works in this way? Because in the destroy or create files, we do not target the index file, we target the counter. when this line is reached, it renders the counter again. And counter doesn't include that wrapper that we moved into the index file. Previously, when we had this, it was rendering this whole thing, and that's why we ending up having a duplicate one. But now, after we removed it, it renders only this inside of this wrapper. That's why we get only this part updated, and what we just removed doesn't get added again. And this shows you one rule that you can apply when deciding whether you should apply update or replace. So as a general rule, if your partial includes the target element with its ID, use replace. If it only contains the inner element, use update. And also I want to note that what we considered here, this, and this, shows the power of TurboStreams. As you see, in all these cases, we use at least 2 TurboStream operations. In this case, we use TurboStream replace and update. We update 2 elements. In here, we update 2 elements. In this case, we also update 2 elements, and it could be 10 different elements. It could be 20 different elements. And that's the power of TurboStream. So far, we considered how we can use TurboStreams to add, edit, and list messages. Let us now add real-time updates using ActionCable with TurboStreams.